Entrepreneurship behavior emerges from entrepreneurial cognition and thinking. But we know that entrepreneurs are prone to certain types of cognitive biases or errors in thinking. This is Wellness for Entrepreneurs, episode 9. In this episode, we talk to Edzai Zvobwo, who is the founder and CEO of mathsg.com, on how data science and mathematics can be used to overcome cognitive biases that are common to entrepreneurs. Some of our listeners have been interested in how they can overcome some of their cognitive biases as they grow their businesses. Edzai is here to help us. He's a mathematician by training and is an executive data science coach. He holds various qualifications in data analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. He is the author of 6 books, including The Mathematical Genius in You and Spreading Mathematical Happiness. In the midst of all of this, he is also my husband, and him and I spend a lot of time talking about this very topic. Thank you, Edzai, for joining us on this Wellness for Entrepreneurs podcast episode. I'm so grateful that you can be a sounding board for us on this very important topic.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this amazing podcast. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we live in a complex environment which requires entrepreneurs to be making decisions quickly and on the go. Typically, all human beings use mental models or heuristics to simplify their world so that they can make decisions a lot easier and a lot faster. But these are shortcuts, and they often are not as rational as we would like them to be. As an entrepreneur in mathematics and data science, please let me know some of the observations that you've seen regarding cognitive biases. I know for a fact that you are passionate about rationality and objectivity.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So before I go into the how entrepreneurs actually thrive in terms of working and trying to sort their objectives in this volatile and crazy world, I just want to go back to the roots of it, to the mathematics, and say, what maths does for us is that it gives us a framework of thinking. It gives us almost like a skeletal system of problem solving, such that you can use it infused with creativity, with imagination. You can actually use it to come up with novel products and services. You can use it for innovation. You can use it for data analysis that will give you an option to have a data-driven or data-informed decision-making. So I'll quote a Hungarian mathematician. His name was George Polya, and he came up with a 4-step process that he said this was the skeletal system of mathematical problem solving. He said the first thing is that you have to identify a problem, right? Once you've identified a problem, understand the problem, right? Understand the problem. Once you've understood the problem, then you devise a plan. After devising the plan, you carry out the plan, and obviously there's a step of evaluation that you do for every other step, right? It's continuous. And this is not a linear process. It's a very iterative process, right? So using these 5 steps instead of 4, actually. So it's identify the problem, understand the problem, devise a plan, carry out the plan, and evaluate. You'll find that every other model that has been used, whether it's in business schools, whether it's design thinking, is actually based on these five steps, right? You could call it the McKinsey way, you could call it the BCG way, or design thinking, but at the end of the day, it's these steps that you're following. So even data science life cycle, or the software development life cycle, or the innovation life cycle, you'll find that they follow the same structure, although obviously it's contextual, and they put in a bit of jargon and context so that it's relevant to the industries they are working on. So that's the basic framework of problem solving that I believe that is taught by mathematics and can be used in any field by any entrepreneur or anyone in any industry.
Well, that's very interesting. Thanks for that, Edzai. I think you and I talk about, this framework quite often, but rarely would most people connect it to mathematics. Most of us are taught that mathematics is y plus x is equal to, z or anything, something like that. So thank you for that framework. It's quite useful, and I think it's a very good tool for us to use, or for even entrepreneurs to use, as they stop and reflect and assess what problem they would be wanting to solve, and use that as a framework to guide their thinking. And I suppose that's a very useful tool in avoiding a lot of these cognitive biases that entrepreneurs face in their day-to-day life. So thank you for that framework. And we're going to keep that framework in mind as we just go into, the different types of cognitive biases or errors in thinking that entrepreneurs have. So typically, entrepreneurs tend to perceive risk as being smaller than other persons do. In fact, this is what allows them to be entrepreneurs in the very first place. However, this does mean that entrepreneurs do end up getting into quite risky situations. So getting a loan and not necessarily being able to pay it back. I mean, as you think about this, given the framework you've now explained to us, what are the things, the tips that you could advise entrepreneurs to use when it comes to risk assessment?
So you find that entrepreneurs, by definition, right, are risk takers because they are willing to start ventures. It's riskier than staying in a job where you're guaranteed of a salary, where you are guaranteed of processes that have evolved over periods of time. I mean, if you're working for a company like Coca-Cola, for example, you know that the company has been in existence for more than 100 years. So everything is well entrenched, So by the very nature of entrepreneurship, there is risk. But obviously, now, especially now in the 21st century, where we've got an information society, a network connected society, we have access to lots of data, and we should be able to make data-driven decisions that de-risk some of the risk-taking. I don't know if that's an oxymoron, but there has to be de-risked risk-taking, right? So one of the main ways that I've seen entrepreneurs naturally flourish in terms of risk-taking is actually counterfactual thinking, right? The fact that an entrepreneur will look at a situation and say, why is this situation like this? And be able to imagine a world that does not exist, or a parallel universe, to say, what if things changed in such a way, right? That's counterfactual thinking, because you're literally generating a non-existent world and trying to bring it to life, So now we have methods, we have statistical and data science methods that can help you actually calculate the probability of success or not, right? Based on things that did not happen, So that's why now, I mean, I'm talking about things like Bayesian networks. People like Judea Pearl, the Stanford professor, they have come up with ways where you can now quantify things that did not happen. Giving an example of how people are using experimentation, right? Prototyping to understand the risk of going into a world, a simulated world that does not exist. They're using things like A/B testing, things that allow you to be as inventive as possible. But obviously, there's something that is key in making sure that you do not take uninformed decisions when venturing into the unknown world of the parallel universe, right? And this is the idea of, if you have a framework, like I mentioned, the 5-step framework of identifying a problem, understanding it, carrying out the plan and all that, right? We're saying that where we are right now, our reality serves as evidence. So we have data on what is happening right now. So whether it's data coming from the World Bank or the UN or your website or whatever, right? You can use that data as evidence of what is. And then from there, you update your own beliefs as to what is possible or impossible in the future. So there, you have an understanding of what is happening, and then you devise a plan. That plan that you're devising does not exist. When Elon Musk comes out and says, I'm going to reduce the cost of a rocket such that it's going to cost 30% of what NASA is currently incurring in terms of costs, that is ludicrous. That is madness. But obviously, he has a method, right? With Elon Musk, he has a method that is popular in physics, right? Which is called thinking from first principles. Again, if you take his method of thinking from first principles, it fits into George Polya's 5-step method, which is a skeletal system of problem solving, basically. There are ways of quantifying risk through research, and research doesn't have to be confined to observational data that you have collected. You can even use that as an a priori to be able to reason beyond what is at the moment. The understanding of data collection and using data to dream is what I'm talking about.
That's really awesome. And I like the point you're making around utilizing data and then extending that data to think about new value propositions or creating a new world that doesn't necessarily exist. I think in this process you mentioned something around counterfactual thinking, and I would have wanted us to just dwell on that a little bit more so that we could just really help a lot of entrepreneurs and listeners of this podcast who really don't have an appreciation of what counterfactual thinking is and how they could encounter it or use it in their day-to-day and improve ultimately their value proposition utilizing data. Could you just explain that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, counterfactual thinking starts, the experts, the psychologists tell us that it starts when somebody's like 18 months old, when they start having your imaginary friends, right? Because that's where they are dreaming and going into the Cinderella world. They are creating a world that doesn't exist, right? So you find that kids inherently have that ability. So that means that human beings have the cognitive capacity to dream, to imagine, right? To have that counterfactual thinking. So you could call it counterfactual reasoning, you could call it counterfactual thinking or counterfactual imagination, right? So you're saying you are able to create an alternative reality to what is there in front of you, right? So that is an ability that we have as people from a young age. And I think that is why even some of the coaches, entrepreneurial coaches, encourage you to be childlike when you come up with ideas for innovation, right? But now it doesn't have to be unconstrained imagination. It could be imagination that is informed by reality, right? Such that it bounds your venturing into the unknown, right? That's where now the updating of evidence, as you learn more, as you acquire more information, you are more than capable to now dream in an informed way, right? So dreaming in an informed way is, I think, the hallmark of the difference between stupidity and informed dreaming. So I would say someone like Elon Musk is an informed dreamer. He dreams, but he's not stupid because he is informed by his prior knowledge, where he sits down, understands the problem, devises a plan, and tries to do that stupid thing, but it's informed by data. So counterfactual thinking is basically about imagining. It's about dreaming, but using tools and mechanisms of research that have been there. So I'll give you an example. The medical field, especially epidemiology, has been using counterfactual thinking for a very long time. When they do clinical trials for new drugs and stuff like that, you find in trying to establish causality, right? To say that does drug A that we've given our patient actually heal this patient, right? They also say, what if we'd not given this person the drug? would this person have got better as well? So you find that we might be spending time giving these people these drugs when in actual fact, this was actually a placebo in a way, you get it? Because those people could have just been well without the drug. So they test for those things when they do clinical trials. Or a present day example is A/B testing, where, for example, you want to find out to say what is the best color scheme for my podcast cover on iTunes, right? So you decide to say, okay, I'm going to have a treatment group. I'm going to have a control group. So the treatment group, I'm going to show them the blue version, and the control group, I'm going to show them the orange version, right? And then you check out the performance to see which one is doing better. So you see that, okay, fine, if I move from orange to blue, there is actually a statistically significant improvement in the engagement of my podcast with the audience. So you are using two parallel worlds, right? The blue one and the orange one, right? So that is also a basis for creating parallel worlds, alternative realities.
So it sounds like counterfactual thinking is more around asking what if statements, so what if this didn't happen? What if this didn't happen? Would the result or the outcome have been different? So, I mean, for an entrepreneur coming from rural South Africa, Thailand, or India, how does that entrepreneur gain access to those tools to help them, collect this data, run these control groups that you're talking about, and analyze this statistically? I mean, it sounds like it's something that only pharmaceutical companies do because they run large trials on a daily basis. But what about the normal person or the man on the street?
So you'll find that, I mean, this is not just a quantitative thing, right? You could do it qualitatively. I mean, you have knowledge. It could be anecdotal evidence that you have, right? And you have beliefs that I believe that based on what is, I believe things can go that way, left or right, right? Of which that's a hypothesis. This is the hallmark of statistics, hypothesis testing, where you're saying the null hypothesis is the status quo, right? But you are testing to say, I believe, so you're testing the alternative hypothesis. So think of counterfactual thinking in terms of hypothesis thinking, where you're saying the null hypothesis is the what? Is what is. And you're saying your beliefs are what you're testing in the alternative hypothesis. Now, this you can achieve using the information that is freely available online, using discussions. They don't have to be formal, even informal discussions with possible clients, just understanding. So you form a hypothesis and say, okay, right now, people love Uber, right? That's your null hypothesis. And then you're saying, but if I believe that if I lower the prices and come in at a cheaper price, people are going to be able to come to my offering, which is a competitor to Uber. So you can go out and ask people, and that doesn't have to be a formal survey, right? And then you use that data to inform decisions. You get it? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have massive infrastructure. You don't have to have massive data scientists doing this. It's something that you build over time, and you're updating your evidence over time. So it's not just restricted to pharmaceutical companies and your Googles and Facebooks. So causal reasoning, causal inference can be done using heuristics, can be done using what are known as DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, where you just draw and you use theory and reasoning, not data, right? So it could be data-driven, it could be heuristic-driven. So anyone should be able to do that. And that's why I think you've realized, let's say in Silicon Valley, when you're proposing and looking for funding, the VCs will ask you, so have you done some research? Have you gone out and done some user surveys and understood what the market is? Because now they want to see what you believe is your value proposition versus to what the data that you found is saying, So it's all about hypothesis testing, basically.
Well, that's awesome. And I think as an entrepreneur, your first instinct is to get a hunch on something that could work, or you observe a problem and you have a hunch on the solution that you could develop to solve that problem and turn that into money. And most entrepreneurs then go off and immediately execute on it. So if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm halfway through running my business, at which point now, and I've now heard this podcast as to what I could do to understand my problem a lot better, to collect data on whether the solution could work. What could I do in retrospect to try and understand whether the path I'm on makes sense for me right now, using data and the suggestions that you've made in this podcast?
Yeah, so I believe that the first thing that whether you're running the business or not, but identifying the key metrics that you can use to measure success. Because how do you know you're succeeding if you're not tracking and measuring key performance indicators, So metrics are the best. So you look for key metrics that make sense to your particular context in terms of business, and then track those. And then now, that's where now you can play around to say, okay, if I reduce this one, what happens to my key metric? If it's income, revenue, then what do I have to do in order to raise the revenue? Okay, this is what I don't have to do because it will result in a loss in revenue. So I believe that metric definition based on your objectives is the starting point. And then from there, you figure out to say, what kind of innovations, what kind of product offerings am I going to give? Am I going to start new uncharted novel products, or am I going to be an efficiency entrepreneur where I'm saying I'm going to do price reduction, or I'm going to bring in something totally new? Now, counterfactual thinking is very important in terms of establishing whether you're going to be an efficiency entrepreneur or you're going to be a novel original type entrepreneur. Because the further you can actually dream and think of counterfactual world, that is how you're going to determine whether you're going to bring in something new. Because going to Mars is something that is beyond the scope of most of us. But in Elon Musk's world, he can travel to Mars in his brain and come back. He has parties on Mars, right? He has functions on Mars because he's already there. He's in that space. So for him, it's easier cognitively to think about going to Mars, right? Mm-hmm. So that's important to say that value proposition that you say you're going to be offering. Is it going to be an efficiency one? Is it going to be a differentiation because it's never been done before? But it depends on how far you're willing to dream and also how much evidence you have that backs your dreams. Yes.
I just like the constant reference to dreaming next to data that you are making, Yeah. So it really does sound like a oxymoron. But I know that you wrote a book called Spreading Mathematical Happiness, right? Yeah. And I've just thought about this book right now in a sense that, we're living in a completely changing world. The world before us is resetting, and it is something that we've never imagined before. So using this type of approach, and you're quite correct, we need data to help us figure out whether our value propositions are going to make sense. But in this world, and using some of the principles in Spreading Mathematical Happiness, how do we activate that curiosity and that ability to stretch our imagination a little bit further than what we've been able to do?
So I believe the approach to schooling has actually affected the way that we interact with the world. A subject like mathematics, I don't think it's of benefit to us as a species, as humans, to be confronted with that subject in a very abstract manner. It should be very applied. Because I can never add and subtract better than a calculator. better than a robot, a computer, you know what I mean? So should we still be focusing on the fluency of the subject, or should we be focusing on thinking about ideas that we cannot necessarily automate, So shouldn't we be teaching mathematics using Python or R or any of those programming languages, such that we'll be able to utilize these skills within our reality, you know what I mean? So the presentation of mathematics and all these other subjects has to change. Because I think if you look at it, countries like Finland are doing quite a good job. They have moved away from subject lines, hard subject lines to say I'm doing math, science, whatever. They now look at a thematic approach where it's project-based. It's result goal-oriented, such that you learn everything with geography, science, computing, everything within one set of problems, And you find that also the Silicon Valley has also come up with what are known as, I'm forgetting the name. Okay, so these are like challenges where they solve problems. They get a problem, they get scientists, social scientists, and everybody together, and then they run a challenge such that they come up with a solution, right? Quickly. It's just that, I mean, the name is escaping me. I think it's this podcast stage that's making me nervous, eh? It's such a big podcast. So it's important that we incorporate all these things, the soft skills, the hard skills, and use them to solve real life problems. You know what I mean? So that's my take. Yeah.
Well, I like that, because entrepreneurship is about solving problems, or creating new problems that have not been solved for, in a sense. So I like the approach to that. The way mathematics has been taught in our schools, firstly needs to change as we step into this new world, and that even entrepreneurs must see things like mathematics, data science as not being far from their worlds, but being closely linked to the day-to-day encounters and problems that they see and opportunities that they see in their worlds. So I think that's quite useful. And I think, just in closing, if we could just understand how the mathematical genius actually navigates this in his own life, that would be great, because those types of pearls would really be valuable to our entrepreneurs or listeners.
Yeah, so you find, I mean, we are multidimensional beings. There's no one who is mathematical or who's born mathematical or accounting or whatever, right? We are multifaceted. So I believe that the generalists are going to win, where as an entrepreneur, know a little bit of accounting, know a little bit of data science, know a little bit of marketing, everything, such that when you are operating, you have a feel, you have an understanding, a basic understanding of everything. Obviously, you might have your anchor skill, but have an appreciation of data, such that when you go out and you're doing your marketing leads, you know that you have a direct effect on the data quality in the business, right? And the data quality has an effect on ROI, which is revenue or whatever it is that you're doing, right? So it means that you understand the interlinkages, the cause and effect of any actions that you take as a founder, as a member of a startup community, and appreciation of different skills is amazing. I mean, it's like taking us back to the Renaissance age, where people like Leonardo da Vinci, they had frameworks that they used and could transfer them from one industry to another. Da Vinci, when he was drawing the Mona Lisa or drawing the Vitruvian Man, was using phi, the golden ratio, which is a very mathematical number, a ratio which is sometimes called the number of beauty. That's why you find that some of his designs, some of his works have outlived time, you know what I mean? So if you have a framework that you can transfer and use in any scenario, I think you'll be able to appreciate. Because right now, I can go into any field that I've never been in, and I'll be able to use my thinking mental model, right? Almost like the George Polya one, and I'll be able to reason and understand things, right? I'll be able to ask the right questions for me to elicit the right answers, right? So let's have frameworks for problem solving. And mathematics is one thing, one subject that from a young age, it teaches you that. Even the difficulty of mathematics is a good thing because it teaches you grit, it teaches you resilience. And that is one thing that entrepreneurs ought to have, because entrepreneurship, as we know, it is not easy, right? So grit, resilience, backed by optimism, dreaming, and a thinking framework should get you there.
Great. Thank you, Edzai. I think you've dropped so many pearls of wisdom in our palms, and we will savor and watch them and really, look at them for a while and let it sink in a little bit. So thank you for that. I mean, what we've heard is that we should be thinking in frameworks, and I think the next time you'll explain to us exactly which frameworks are good picks and which ones are not. Yeah. And we should be...
I've
yes.
just remembered the word.
What is the word? I actually wanted to disturb you and say hackathon, but we'll edit this part out.
Right, don't edit it out.
Okay, don't worry. So anyway, so I think it's been absolutely great. So I think next time we'll engage in a lot more depth in terms of, frameworks we can use, and specifically related to entrepreneurship, creativity, and problem solving. But I think what we've heard from you is dreaming using data, which is an oxymoron, but is a very necessary oxymoron in our world. And so I really want to thank you for your time and sharing those pearls of wisdom.
Sure, thank you.
To our listeners, thank you for taking time to explore how entrepreneurs can overcome their various cognitive biases. I will leave you with a few thoughts to ponder on and to respond in the comment box below. How do you keep your feet on the ground while exploring blue sky opportunities? Are there any systematic tools or frameworks that you would have heard today that you use yourself to test your assumptions and that you use to collect data and validate them? Please let us know, and we'll pick up on the conversations with our mathematician and data science in residence, Edzai Zvobwo. Thank you.
Thank you.